Spider-Man!
Hold still, so I can put you out of your misery.
Go ahead, try.
Thanks for the company. Love to stay, but I've got a doctor's appointment.
Oh, me. Shocker.
Imagine a Spider-Man series that somehow manages to capture almost everything that makes Peter Parker such a compelling character. The awkward teenager, the brilliant student, the sarcastic superhero, the loyal friend, the inexperienced fighter, and the young man constantly learning that every decision comes with a price. That series was *The Spectacular Spider-Man*, an animated show that first premiered in 2008, and despite lasting only 2 seasons and 26 episodes, developed a reputation that has remained remarkably strong years after its cancellation. The series was developed for television by Greg Weisman and Victor Cook, with Josh Keaton providing the voice of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. It originally aired on the CW, before moving to Disney XD for its 2nd season. What made the series immediately different was its approach to Peter Parker. Instead of beginning with an already established superhero who simply moves from one villain to another, the story focused on Peter as a teenager whose entire life was still being formed. School mattered, homework mattered, friendships mattered, romance mattered, money mattered. His relationship with Aunt May mattered. And then, on top of all of that, Peter had to find time to be Spider-Man. The result was a version of the character whose superhero adventures were inseparable from his personal problems. Every time Peter disappeared to fight a villain, there was usually another part of his life waiting to punish him for being late, absent, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. The first season established that idea with remarkable consistency. Peter begins as an ordinary high school student who gains his powers after being bitten by a genetically altered spider. He discovers that he has incredible strength, agility, reflexes, wall-crawling abilities, and the potential to become something far greater than the person he was before the bite. But the series never treats those powers as a magical solution to Peter's problems. Instead, becoming Spider-Man creates new ones. Peter needs money, so he takes photographs for the Daily Bugle. He has school responsibilities, but villains do not care whether he has an exam the next morning. He wants to spend time with his friends, but crime can happen at any moment. His greatest challenge is therefore not defeating enemies. It is finding a way to keep Peter Parker's life from completely collapsing while Spider-Man becomes increasingly important. That balance is one of the biggest reasons the series feels so faithful to the spirit of the original comics. The creators drew heavily from decades of Spider-Man storytelling, while also reorganizing characters and events into a tightly connected animated continuity. Rather than simply adapting individual comic stories one after another, the show built long-running character arcs and allowed seemingly minor events to become important later. Greg Weisman described the central theme as essentially the education of Peter Parker, meaning that the series was interested in watching Peter learn, make mistakes, face consequences, and gradually become a more mature hero. The supporting cast was equally important. Gwen Stacy, Harry Osborn, Mary Jane Watson, Liz Allen, Flash Thompson, Eddie Brock, Aunt May, J. Jonah Jameson, Norman Osborn, and many others were not simply background characters waiting for Peter to finish his superhero battles. They were active parts of his world. Gwen's relationship with Peter developed gradually. Harry struggled under the shadow of his father. Liz's relationship with Peter became increasingly complicated, and Mary Jane entered the story without immediately being reduced to a conventional romantic role. This gave Peter's civilian life the same sense of progression as his superhero career. And then there were the villains. One of the show's greatest strengths was the way it treated Spider-Man's rogues gallery as a collection of characters rather than disposable obstacles. The first season introduced or developed figures such as the Vulture, Electro, Sandman, Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Venom, and others, with many of them connected to larger stories involving science, crime, corporate ambition, personal betrayal, or Peter's own relationships. The villains were dangerous, but the show frequently gave them understandable motivations. That made their transformations more meaningful because viewers could see the person who existed before the costume, mutation, accident, or obsession. The visual style also became one of the show's defining characteristics. The character designs were stylized, simplified, and expressive rather than attempting to reproduce realistic human anatomy. At first glance, that approach might seem almost too simple for a serious Spider-Man story, but the animation used those shapes extremely effectively. Characters could move with exaggerated energy, action scenes could become extremely fluid, and Spider-Man's acrobatics had a distinctive rhythm. The design also allowed the series to remain visually recognizable without becoming trapped by the limitations of realism. Peter himself benefited enormously from this style because Josh Keaton's voice performance could sell the contrast between Peter and Spider-Man. As Peter, he could sound nervous, awkward, excited, frustrated, or overwhelmed. As Spider-Man, the same character suddenly became more confident and sarcastic, throwing jokes at enemies while swinging through the city. Yet the show never forgot that these were two sides of the same teenager. The jokes were often a defense mechanism, especially when Peter was frightened or under pressure. The first season's storytelling also established a pattern that became central to the entire series. Peter would encounter a new challenge, attempt to solve it, make a decision, and then discover that the consequences were more complicated than expected. His powers gave him the ability to intervene, but they did not give him perfect judgment. In fact, one of the show's strongest ideas was that Peter could be incredibly intelligent and still make terrible decisions. He could understand science better than most people his age and still fail to understand his own emotions. That became particularly important when the series explored Peter's relationships. His feelings for Gwen, his connection with Liz, his friendship with Harry, and his growing relationship with Mary Jane all developed alongside the superhero story. Peter was not simply choosing between different romantic possibilities. He was trying to understand what he wanted while also dealing with the consequences of hiding his identity. The secret itself became a source of tension. Peter could never completely explain where he was going, why he was injured, why he disappeared, or why he sometimes seemed emotionally distant. The second season expanded almost everything. Peter's enemies became more dangerous, his relationships became more complicated, and the consequences of earlier events became increasingly difficult to avoid. Sony's official material describes the second season as continuing Peter's conflict with a rogues gallery of supervillains, while his superhero identity creates further complications in his life. The season introduced or developed characters including Kraven, Mysterio, Tinkerer, and Silvermane, while returning villains from the first season. Greg Weisman also explained at the time that the second season would bring back every first-season villain, while introducing additional characters including Silver Sable, Calypso, and Molten Man. One of the most interesting elements of the second season was its willingness to let Peter's world evolve instead of simply resetting after every adventure. The consequences of earlier stories continued to matter. Friendships changed. Characters became more suspicious. Villains returned with different motivations. Peter's understanding of his responsibilities became more mature, but his problems did not disappear. If anything, becoming a better Spider-Man made his personal sacrifices more obvious. The season eventually built toward one of the most memorable developments in the series, involving Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin mystery. Norman's relationship with Harry was already one of the show's most emotionally complicated elements, and the Goblin storyline transformed that tension into something much darker. The series understood that Spider-Man's villains become especially effective when they attack Peter's personal world, rather than simply trying to destroy New York City. The final episodes brought the story toward a dramatic conclusion while still leaving enormous possibilities for the future. The second season consisted of 13 episodes, ending with final curtain in November 2009. Across both seasons, the series produced 26 episodes in total. And this is where the history of Asterisk, the Spectacular Spider-Man, becomes almost as interesting as the fiction itself, because the show was not originally designed to stop after only 26 episodes. Greg Weisman and the creative team had plans for a much larger story. Weisman explained that the general direction of the third season had already been worked out during preparation for the second season. The broader plan envisioned 5 seasons and 65 episodes. That means the audience saw only a portion of the story the creators had imagined. There were additional villains, character developments, and long-term arcs that never reached animation. Among the planned future material were characters such as Scorpion and Hobgoblin, along with other major villains including Carnage, Mr. Negative, and Morbius. The planned third season also would have involved Kurt Connors moving to Florida and attempting to find a cure for Electro. There were even plans for a direct-to-DVD story set in Florida between seasons. These plans demonstrate just how much narrative architecture existed behind the scenes, even though only the first 2 seasons were produced. So why did such a well-liked series end after only 2 seasons? The answer is more complicated than simply saying that someone decided the show was bad or that audiences stopped caring. The business situation surrounding Spider-Man's television rights changed dramatically. In 2009, Sony returned Spider-Man television rights to Marvel as part of a broader arrangement involving the live-action film rights. At the same time, the corporate landscape was changing because Disney was acquiring Marvel. Weisman later explained that the situation became a rights problem in which no single company possessed everything necessary to continue producing the specific version of Asterisk, the Spectacular Spider-Man Asterisk. This distinction is important because Greg Weisman himself repeatedly pushed back against the idea that one company simply canceled the series for a straightforward creative reason. In 2012, he explained that the production had become caught in complicated corporate circumstances, saying that the people involved at Marvel, Sony, and Disney appeared to like the show, but the rights situation made continuation impossible. The specific designs, story elements, and other creative components associated with this particular version of Spider-Man were part of the complicated ownership picture. Marvel could produce Spider-Man animation, but continuing this exact incarnation required navigating rights connected to the existing production. Eventually, Marvel moved forward with a different animated Spider-Man project instead. That new series was Ultimate Spider-Man Asterisk, which premiered in 2012. For fans of Asterisk, the Spectacular Spider-Man Asterisk, this was understandably frustrating because the cancellation had not come from the story reaching a natural conclusion. Peter Parker's journey was still unfolding. The characters were still changing. The creators had plans for multiple additional seasons. And then the production simply stopped. Yet the strange thing is that cancellation did not make the series disappear. In many ways, it had the opposite effect. Over the years, the Spectacular Spider-Man Asterisk developed a reputation as one of the most respected animated interpretations of the character. The series was praised for its writing, character development, visual identity, action, humor, and faithfulness to the spirit of Spider-Man. Josh Keaton's performance in particular became closely associated with the character for an entire generation of viewers. Even after newer Spider-Man films and animated projects arrived, fans continued to compare them with this 2008 series. That legacy is especially interesting because the show itself never had the opportunity to complete its intended story. Many modern superhero projects receive dozens of episodes, multiple seasons, spin-offs, and years of development. The spectacular Spider-Man * had only 26 episodes, but those 26 episodes were structured with enough continuity and character development that they created the impression of a much larger world. Every season felt like a chapter in a longer story, rather than an isolated cartoon. And there is still no confirmed return of the original series. As of 2026, there is no officially announced third season, revival, or continuation of the spectacular Spider-Man *. Greg Weisman has previously stated that a third season was not possible under the right circumstances surrounding the original production. That means fans should be careful whenever rumors or social media posts claim that a revival has been officially announced. The existence of fan campaigns, speculation, or nostalgic discussion is not the same thing as a confirmed production. There is, however, an interesting Spider-Man development happening in 2026 that shows how strongly the spectacular name continues to exist within Marvel Publishing. Marvel is currently publishing Spectacular Spider-Man, Brand New Day, a comic series launched in 2026. With Dan Slott writing and artists including Marcos Martin and Marcus too. Its third issue was published on July 29, 2026. But this is a comic book series, not a continuation of the 2008 animated television series, and there is currently no official indication that it represents a revival of the animated show. That distinction matters because the name Spectacular Spider-Man * has existed in Marvel Publishing long before the animated series. Marvel's catalog includes the original * Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man * comic series, which began in the 1970s, along with later series carrying variations of the title. So when the word spectacular appears in a new Spider-Man project, it should not automatically be interpreted as a continuation of the animated universe. What makes the 2008 series special, then, is not simply nostalgia. It is the way the show understood the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Spider-Man. Peter Parker has extraordinary abilities, but he is still a teenager. He can stop a supervillain, but he cannot stop his homework from being due. He can save someone's life, but he cannot always save a friendship. He can swing across New York faster than almost anyone, but he cannot outrun the consequences of his own choices. That contradiction is Spider-Man. The series also understood that becoming a hero is not a single event. Peter receives his powers in the beginning, but becoming Spider-Man is a continuous process. Every fight teaches him something. Every failure changes him. Every person he disappoints forces him to reconsider his priorities. Every villain represents another lesson. The superhero identity is therefore not the destination. It is the mechanism through which Peter grows up. That is why the cancellation remains frustrating even today. The show did not fail because it ran out of ideas. Quite the opposite. Its creators had years of ideas left. The production ended because the complicated business and rights circumstances surrounding Spider-Man television made continuation impossible. Greg Weisman has been very clear about that history, and the surviving interviews give fans an unusually detailed picture of what might have happened next. More than 15 years after the second season ended, the series therefore occupies a fascinating place in Spider-Man history. It is simultaneously a finished television series and an unfinished story. The 26 episodes are complete, but the larger narrative the creators envisioned never was. Peter Parker's journey on screen stopped before the planned 5-season destination could be reached. And perhaps that is why the spectacular Spider-Man * continues to be discussed. New Spider-Man movies arrive. New animated series appear. New comic runs begin. New actors take the role. But whenever fans talk about the animated versions that truly understood Peter Parker, this series repeatedly comes back into the conversation. It captured the humor without losing the drama, the action without sacrificing character development, and the superhero spectacle without forgetting the teenager underneath the mask. In the end, The Spectacular Spider-Man remains a rare example of a series that became bigger in reputation after it ended. It only produced 2 seasons and 26 episodes, but its carefully constructed continuity, memorable characters, strong performances, distinctive animation, and long-term storytelling gave it a lasting identity. There is currently no confirmed revival, and there is no official 3rd season on the way. But the fact that audiences are still talking about one of Spider-Man's shortest animated series shows exactly how much the creators accomplished in the time they were given. Peter Parker may have stopped swinging across this particular animated New York years ago, but for many fans, that version of Spider-Man never really stopped being spectacular.